Right, now I have the unenviable job of introducing someone who probably needs no introduction. Alain de Botton, best-selling author, described as, or his books described as a philosophy of everyday life. He was born in Zurich, now lives in London. First published at the age of 23. Anyone who's a writer, when you hear things like that, it really makes you think, what the hell have I been doing with my life? But his work has now been published in 30 countries. He's written on love, travel, architecture, literature, was even Heathrow's first writer in residence, and his best-selling titles include The Consolations of Philosophy, The Art of Travel, Religion for Atheists, and most pertinently to this evening, The Pleasures and Sorrows of Work, which has been my bedtime book for the last 2 weeks. To research this book, Alain travelled across the world for 2 years with a photographer in tow. He's going to tell you more about this, but my favourite bit was the fact he managed to spend so much time in United Biscuits. Why not? Why not spend time at Biscuit Factory? Brilliant. Anyway, so it was more about the themes of work rather than just biscuits. Why do we do it? How can it be more bearable? And what is a meaningful life? The book is full of ideas and analysis and fulsomely praised, but I'm going to allow Alain to tell you more about that. So please take the stage, Alain. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. And I too found that film incredibly moving. And I think it's moving because when you think about the modern world, there are really two things that we live for nowadays. And the first one is love. And the second one is work. You know, if you open up anybody's heart, the two massive ambitions that all of us enter the adult world with is that we'll meet somebody with whom we'll be happy, and that we'll find a job with whom we'll be happy. And I think it's just worth stepping back before going on to other things, just worth stepping back and thinking how weird that is. For most of human history, that has not been the case. You know, if you scroll back to ancient Greece, the ancient Athenians did not expect that their work would bring fulfillment. Aristotle famously wrote that anybody who depends on a salary, anybody who has to go to work to earn money, is a slave. Doesn't matter how much you earn, you're a slave. We qualify most of us here as slaves. Now, that's not very nice. We don't agree with that, but it's worth thinking about that the fact that you need to earn money was, for the ancient Greeks, a sure sign of slavery and incompatible with a good life. It's such an odd idea nowadays. Of course, that idea starts changing, and it starts changing in the Middle Age, in the Renaissance, when for the first time in the lives of certain people, artists, you get an idea of work which is familiar to modern ears. And that's the idea that you can work for money, but at the same time be fulfilled, that there is a kind of union of passion and financial interest. And so if you look at the careers of people like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, these are the first modern heroes. They're able to earn money and fulfill what you might as well call their souls. And this idea spreads from being something that only a few artists are able to enjoy to encompass the whole of society, so that now the education system in which we grow up predicts that everybody, however fairly or unfairly, but it does predict, it works under the assumption that everybody has got a shot at not just earning money, but earning money doing something that they love. And it's very interesting that there's exactly the same idea that happened in the realm of love. I know we're here to discuss work, but a few moments on love. Because, you know, for most of human history, it would have seemed extraordinary that you should love the person that you had married. Perhaps it still seems extraordinary to you, I don't know. But the idea was that you just tolerate your spouse in order to have some kids with them, and you just put up with family life, and if you more or less get on with them, that's fine. But you are not looking for romantic fulfillment. And then, of course, it starts changing at about the same time as attitudes change towards work. So middle of the 18th century, you suddenly start getting a new idea. You pick it up in the novels of Jane Austen. It doesn't matter how rich somebody is, they've also got to be nice. Somebody's not just a suitable match, but they've got to be a suitable match for the heart. And this new idea comes about, that the person you marry should be someone, yes, have good kids with and raise a family with, but they also need to be someone that you can feel passionately about. Now, don't get me wrong. These dreams are beautiful dreams, that you should marry not just to procreate, but to love, and that you should go out into the workplace not just to earn money, but in order to fulfill your soul. These are beautiful ideas. Unfortunately, They're not easy ideas. And for most of us, they throw us into crisis. I hope I'm not being autobiographical, but at least once or twice a week, we have a crisis in one or other of those areas, sometimes both, and very often on a Sunday evening. Sunday evening is not just, you think it's just you, but it's not. It's an iconic moment in the calendar when the dreams and ambitions of your deepest self collide viciously with the reality of Monday morning. And it's worse at around 5 o'clock. Normally by 9 p.m., if there's something good on the telly, you're over the worst. But I would argue, and I'm going to go back to this, take that moment of crisis seriously, because it holds within it a promise that you ignore with X factor or whatever at your peril. So keep going with that anxiety and that despair. We're going to come back to that. But what I want to try and sum up for you, first of all, is some of the difficulties we've got. I'm absolutely with that film that we just saw about the need to try and find the job that works for you. Brilliant ambition, a beautiful ambition. But in order to sort of get there, let's not be sentimental, let's not be saccharine. Let's look at some of the problems that workers face doing this. Now, the first problem that we face is that we live in a world of fierce snobs. Now, the word snob used to be associated with people who are interested in, country houses and titles and aristocrats, and it's very easy to think, I don't know any snobs like that. Problem is, there are no more snobs like that. Well, there are a few, but you're not likely to meet any. The point is that snobbery goes on, and what snobbery is merely a way of looking at a small part of somebody and then coming to an inviolable and fixed vision of who that person is that no new information can shake. So if you meet a clothes snob and you look at someone like me, you think, no, forget it. Even though I could be nice and interesting, doesn't matter. You're a clothes snob, don't listen to that person. Now, the dominant form of snobbery that exists out there in the world is job snobbery. What's on your business card determines the amount of what you could call, for lack of a better word, love that you will receive from the world. The amount of love and respect and dignity depends entirely on how you can answer the primordial, quintessential modern question, what do you do? And if you answer it well, you'll be into a nice, pleasant conversation and lots of smiles. And if you answer it wrongly, the person will say, is that the time? And leave you alone with the peanuts. The opposite of a snob is your mother. Not necessarily your mother or indeed my mother, but as it were, the ideal mother. The ideal mother does not really care. She loves you, the deep you. But most of us around are not our mothers. And therefore, we are thrown against the very harsh judgmental system. Now, sometimes we hear that we're a very ambitious and materialistic society, that everybody's out there to be very materialistic. We're greedy people. I don't think we're any greedier than any other generation. I don't think we're materialistic at all compared to other generations. We are the same as we've always been. The thing is, we live in a world where love and respect is distributed according to how many material goods you've got. And when we want material goods, it's not really the material goods we want, it's the love, it's the respect, it's the dignity that we want. And the more love and respect we hunger for, the more we will want to invest in material goods. The next time you see somebody driving down the road in a Ferrari, don't think, greedy, materialistic person. Think, my God, this is somebody with a really, really intense need for love. Therefore, feel sorry for them. They are burdened by a psychological vulnerability, and we should help them. Now, we live in this world of snobs, and there's very little time to get to that right answer. What do you do? To get to the right answer that will be convincing to get you the respect you need. Now, why do we find it so hard to get to the right answer? And the part of the problem is that society, which plans everything, right? We're a society of planners. Everything is minutely choreographed and distributed, and there are rules for everything. There are two areas in life which are abandoned totally, more or less, to chance. And they are exactly the areas that I was just discussing. Love and work. The two most important things are abandoned to love. Let me look at love first, right? Where are you going to meet that special person on whom your entire well-being and the future of your children will depend? Where are you going to meet them? Well, I don't know, maybe in the nightclub. Just go down to the nightclub, sit by the bar, order a Coke, hang around, try and, chat to people like that. That is how the most important decision is left. And when it comes to the workplace, you'll get a visit from a career counselor in your last year at school. You'll do a quick little test. They'll tell you you're a fireman or a North Sea oil rigger, or whatever it is, and off you go. And one of the interesting things about the Randstad report is that there was an extraordinary statistic about the number of people. I think 44% of people fall into a job, right? In other words, the road into employment is hugely haphazard. And this leads to a terrible and quintessential modern agony. The feeling that what it says on your business card and what it says in your heart are different. There's a version of this in love too. I ditch the love, you get the point. But, there's an agonizing moment in many people's lives, and we got flavor of it in the film, where you say, you gather the family round, gather your loved ones round, and you say, I've got something important to tell you. Everybody looks a bit nervously at you. And you say, I'm not who you think I am. And your sister starts crying and goes, I knew it, I always, and you go, no, it's not that. And you go, the thing is, I'm not an accountant, I'm a landscape gardener. Inside, I'm a landscape gardener. I've got to give that a shot. And, there are brave people making those speeches all the time, and one requires unbelievable bravery. Part of the problem is that our friends don't really like us changing. Have you noticed this about our friends? Our friends like to pigeonhole us. They like to say, oh, but you're the accountant, aren't you? And you go, no, I'm writing a novel. They go, yeah, but you're the accountant, aren't you? I think that any time that you're trying to move jobs, you also have to change your friends. There are normally about 5 or 6 frenemies in your vicinity who are very attached to you doing your job, because their own sense of well-being and their own sense of what they're doing depends on you doing a certain job and you being unhappy. They rely on your unhappiness in order to justify their own. You've got to get to grips with those people, and you may need to get rid of them. It's very difficult. I would say that the task of finding your way to a correct career, the task of career counseling, is about at the level of medieval brain surgery. Right? Now, in medieval days, there were these people called brain surgeons. And sometimes they had a good idea. You'd say, I've got a headache. And they'd go, okay, lie down on the bench. We're just going to drill a hole at the back of your head. It'll let the air out. And, a lot of people died. Over 44% of people would have died. But, some maybe felt better. And there it was, and they got their money. I think that career counseling, what we call career counseling, is at about that level. In other words, it's a disaster. We have not invested sufficient resources into studying the route from education into work. It's a process that is still monstrously haphazard, catastrophically so. And I think that, what we would really need, to really find out what someone wants to do, this is one of the great questions, and we simply refuse to give it the dignity and seriousness which it deserves. So people will say things like, I'm not really sure what to do, but somebody's told me that I should go traveling, so I'm just going to go to Thailand, travel around, perhaps an idea will come. Disastrous idea. Do you really think that's going to be the answer? This is considered a plausible response to the dilemma of how to find employment, traveling to Thailand. Disaster. No wonder that 44% of us are a little bit lost. So we need to really smarten up that area. Look, there's another reason why there are other reasons why we're so anguished around the workplace, and part of it is really beautiful. We're constantly told, you can do it, anyone can do it. And magazines and newspapers are full of stories of people who can do it and who've done it. And all of us know the Sunday newspapers and the despair that they can bring. Please, everyone here with a nervous temperament, don't continue reading the Sunday newspapers, because they're full of people, either who failed catastrophically, that's fine, but much more perniciously, people who have succeeded brilliantly. And when you're trying to get your life together, those stories can be quite dangerous, need to be handled with real care. The idea that you could read the Sunday newspapers for fun is very bizarre, because really what they're trying to do is to remind you of how little you have achieved by paralleling your achievements with those of others. We live in a society of high achievement. And the problem with high achievement is monstrous envy. The interesting thing about envy is that you don't envy everybody, right? You don't envy everybody who's got more than you. I think it's very unlikely that anybody here envies the Queen. Anybody envy the Queen? No. I don't think so. And the reason is, of course, she's got much more money than any of us here, lives in grand houses, etc. But we don't envy her because she's too weird, right? She speaks in an odd way. She's much older than any of us. She just comes from weird queen place kind of thing. So we just don't even think to envy her. The person you do envy is the person who's your age, your gender, and probably, worst of all, who you went to school with. Those people drive you nuts. Certainly drive me nuts. I've got a few. Please never, ever attend a school reunion. Very dangerous thing. In other words, the more you feel kind of equal to somebody, the more you will envy. And the problem with modern society is that it's almost geared pathologically to making us feel equal to everybody. I read an interview with Jeff Bezos the other day, and he's bald, and he was wearing jeans, and he's got a couple of small kids, and he was barbecuing. And the interview sort of showed him barbecuing. And he seemed, and everything in the interview was made to remind you that Jeff Bezos is an ordinary bloke. Problem is, he's not an ordinary bloke. He's as wealthy as, King Louis XIV of France. The thing is that when Louis XIV of France was around, you knew he was the king, and he certainly didn't try and pretend that he was ordinary. But nowadays, very extraordinary people go around pretending they're very ordinary. And this is deeply worrying for most of us, because we then have a problem of runaway envy and a sense of unbelievable possibility mixed with serious doubts about how we're going to make it. If you go to an American bookstore and you look at what's on the shelves of the area called self-development, I sometimes look around there, and half the books are telling you, you can do it, you can make $1 million a week, transform your fortunes. And the other half are telling you how to cope with something the Americans politely called low self-esteem. In other words, feeling absolutely terrible about yourself. And there's a real correlation between a society that tells people, you can do it, you can do anything, you can be the president, and a society that's going to have a bit of a self-esteem problem. Because the terrible, nasty truth is that not everybody is going to be able to do it along the lines in which our society sometimes suggests. And this is a real and structural problem. We are all alive in an age which is selling us a dream which will only work for some of us and which doesn't tend to have nice second and third and fourth tiers to make life acceptable. We live increasingly in a winner-takes-all society psychologically. We also live in a world, increasingly, in which we can't believe that the guys at the top are baddies. In the olden days, you could say, when some great lord would go by or a CEO would go by, we could say, oh, well, they got it from their parents, or, there's a sort of racket, really, etc. Nowadays, politicians on left and right and all educators and CEOs, etc., are telling us all the time, we want to create a meritocratic world. Beautiful idea, meritocratic world. In other words, a world where if you're talented, you can get there. It doesn't matter who your parents were. Lovely idea. Got a nasty sting in the tail. Because if you really believe in a world in which those who get to the top deserve to get to the top, you also have to believe in a world in which those who get to the bottom or stay at the bottom deserve to get to the bottom. In other words, success becomes merited, but so does failure. And you pick that up in the language. In the 14th century in England, if you met somebody who wasn't too successful, when things weren't going so well for them, you would call that person an unfortunate, somebody who literally had not been blessed by the goddess of fortune, weren't doing so well. You were quite polite. Nowadays, what do you call that person? A loser. A loser, particularly in America. That person's a loser. And the reason is that they're playing a game, and the game is more or less fair. And if they've lost, well, they're a loser. And that explains enormous degrees of mental illness and also suicide. The French sociologist Émile Durkheim, writing in the early 20th century, was the first to notice something really bizarre. The richer societies get, the more capitalistic they are, the more individualistic they are, the more the suicide rate goes up. Very weird. Why is that? The reason is that people start to feel responsible for their lives. And they start to feel that what happens to them is a reflection of their deeper self. And that's what makes unemployment so crushing. It's nowadays not the financial burden so much, or that as well, but the real sense is the sense that you have failed. As religion declines, you have failed not in the eyes of God, who's forgiving and kind, but in the eyes of your fellow humans, who tend to be rather cruel and call you a loser. And that leads to enormous and agonizing pressures. There's something else that leads to some of the stresses and difficulties, but also the hope about the modern workplace. It's interesting, one word that kept coming up in that film, and when I researched the workplace, kept coming up. What people really want from their jobs is meaning. Right? If you say to people, what do you want from your job? They say, I want a meaningful job. Now, how does a job become meaningful? I think meaning is created in a job in one of two ways. One, because you feel that you are reducing somebody else's suffering. And two, meaning is produced when you feel that you are increasing somebody's pleasure. So you saw the cancer nurse definitely decreasing suffering. There would be plenty of examples of people who are increasing pleasure. You know, a cook, a chef, somebody who's sanding your stair banister, somebody who's painting your house. There are lots and lots of jobs which increase your feeling of satisfying other people, and also which make you feel that you are decreasing the suffering. That's what we all desperately want. And when I was writing my book, I went around Britain and I asked people, what's your dream job? And I made a little poll of my own around this question. And the two most popular dreams, and they were literally dreams, were one, to own a B&B, and two, to run a cake or pastry shop. Completely crazy. Please don't run a cake or pastry shop or run a B&B. And I don't think these people who answered me wanted that. But the fact they wanted it was fascinating because, and I think anyone who's employing people, anyone who's a manager should learn from this, right? What people desperately want day to day is a feeling that they are able to touch somebody's life and satisfy them. In other words, running a cake shop, you're mixing the cake, you're making it in the morning, you put it out on a tray, some kids come in, you're able to serve them. It's wonderfully concise, it's wonderfully direct. You have the feeling that you are touching somebody's life. Now, the reason why meaning is so hard to find in the workplace is specialization, right? This is the real problem. Now, specialization in the workplace is something that occurs in all advanced capitalist societies. It was Adam Smith, the guru and theorist of capitalism, who first observed that the richer and more sophisticated a society, the more specialists there will be in that society. It's no good being generalists. Societies don't make money if in the morning you're making yogurt, in the midday you're writing a report, and in the afternoon you're making a picture. That's no good. You have to learn to be a packaging technologist or a logistics specialist deliverer or something absolutely, the sort of thing. When you go to parties and people tell you, what nowadays, you say, what do you do? Well, I'm a logistics hub manager. And you go, what? Normally, if your society is a good one, right, you should not be able to understand what somebody does in a question, right? If you go to a party and they go, well, I'm a bricklayer, and the other one goes, well, I'm the farmer, and the other one goes, well, I raise chickens, you're in a poor society. A rich society is one where you have no clue for at least 4 questions what on earth somebody is doing. That's the sort of society that you want from an economic point of view. But there's a meaning problem, you see, because in those societies, right, when you're, the packaging logistics manager of the regional southeast region, the problem is that you very easily lose sight of the bigger picture of what on earth you're doing. And this is the crisis of Sunday evening. You think, I'm this cog in this giant machine, and I'm not quite sure what the thing is contributing to. When an organization is large, it often forgets how to tell the story about what it's doing and how it's helping to the people who work within it. And so they forget what they're doing, and they lose hope. So therefore, what we need to do is to try and make large organizations feel a little bit more like the cake shop. Very, very hard to do. It's almost like a choice that we're facing in society. But certainly, anyone who's managing people, remember that hunger to improve people's lives, to reduce their suffering or increase their pleasure. It lies at the heart, and people will make enormous financial sacrifices, huge. Let's remember that we live in a world where people will be working in, £50,000 a year jobs, and they will go, I'm leaving my job, and people will go, well, why? And they go, I'm just not happy. In a way, it's crazy, and in a way, it's beautiful. Right? This is the world that we live in, where people will, despite the economic turmoil, often with no resources, they will leave their jobs because they will think, life is short, and unless I get this right, it's the one life I've got, and I've got to find fulfillment. Now, what can we do in this area to sort of help ourselves to find slightly better accommodation with our working lives. Look, I mentioned this before, and one of the things I think we have to do is get better at envy, right? Now, the problem with envy is that when we feel it, we tend to deny it and go, oh, I'm sorry, that didn't happen. Because you're not supposed to feel envy, and even if you're not Christian, we still live in a society that's bathed in a Christian atmosphere and that tells us that it's naughty and bad and rude to feel envy. No, it's absolutely essential. You cannot know what your future might be like without feeling horribly and with pain a kind of envy at the life of somebody else who has that life already. So my advice is, on a regular basis, fill in what I would call an envy diary. And in the envy diary, you just write down everybody who you've ever envied and every situation that makes you feel uncomfortable. You know that kind of situation where you're sitting in a bar and somebody goes, yeah, well, recently I started off, I'm in a stationery business and I'm selling stationery to, all around the world or whatever. And you know that feeling, you're kind of happy for them, but actually you're not. Something inside you's going, I'm a bit unhappy. And normally you just go, oh, I must be tired or something. No, you're not. You're envious. You're having an envious attack. Now, the thing about envy is it's very unclear. It's like a fog, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that tomorrow you should go and start a stationery business selling products to Japan or whatever. No, not necessarily. But you have to sit and sift through it. You have to say, okay, well, what is it about the business of running a stationery department that interests me? Is it the stationery itself? No. Is it the selling? I don't know. Is it the product? Is it the, and then little by little, you could find out that really what you need to do is be in hospitality. That's the thing. So you could, in other words, be very suspicious, take your envy seriously, interrogate it, and move on from there. But that requires a real commitment to self-analysis. And the problem is we live with people, very nice people, who'll say, what are you doing? And you'll go, I'm just thinking. And they'll go, the bins need changing. And you'll go, I'm just thinking. Come on, don't be so lazy. The bins need changing. And really what you want to say, but normally one just goes, shut up, or something like this. I do, because I'm horrible, but you're nicer. But really what one wants to say is, though it doesn't look like I'm doing anything, I'm working very hard at trying to imagine for myself the future. And the future currently looks like very fragile little strands. I've got a little bit strand here, a little strand there. And I'm currently like a bird that's trying to move one strand from here, in order to build something more solid. And one day I may be able to see what that shape looks like, but at the moment I can't. So I need an awful lot of time. I may need to spend Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon for the next year thinking about this. And I need that time, but we often don't give ourselves that time. The other thing we need to reform is our education system. Our education system is not fit for purpose. It is entirely disconnected from the world of work. We still study maths, for example, as though the number one reason that we study maths is not the fact that we have to run businesses and handle money. It is extraordinary. Only very seldom in the teaching of maths is money mentioned. The only reason why 99.9% of the British population ever goes anywhere near anything that looks like maths is because of money. And yet the way that teaching is taught, the way the maths is taught, you would imagine that we were all heading for pure theoretical maths at Oxford University. And we need to get to grips with that. As for the humanities, we study English literature. What on earth is the point of English literature? No point. Scrap English literature. We study history. What's the point of history, right? It's useless. What we need to wrestle with is, how are we going to get married? How are we going to get on with people? What sort of people are we going to be? What happens when there's an ethical choice? Now, the good news is there's tons of information on that in history books and in English literature and all sorts of things. The problem is, don't study it under the title English literature, history. Study it under the title how to make a decision, how to get married, how to treat people that you don't like, etc., and use the clues from Herodotus and Plato and Shakespeare and put it to work. We live in a strangely impractical education system, given the deeply practical world we live in. The other thing, and it's a weird thing, and it's an odd thing, because we talk all the time about qualifications and people's hard skills. But of course, the really weird and embarrassing thing is that very often the guys who get to the top, by guys I mean men and women, the guys who get to the top often have not the best qualifications, what they might do, or not the best technical skills. What they have is an ingredient that is almost embarrassing in its triviality. They are confident. This is really weird, because at one level, we live in a kind of, we have this image of meritocracy, which is quite scholarly. In other words, he or she who gets the best grade should get the best job, etc. And then you're thrown out into the world of work, and something weird happens, which is employers don't really care that much about grades. Once a year's gone by, who cares that guy got a double first from Cambridge, right? No one minds. What really matters is this person capable of talking and responding and listening and leading? And these things are psychological faculties. And so the real HR department of the modern workforce is home, right? That's where it happens. And some of you will have kids, and some of these kids will be very tyrannical, and you'll put some fish fingers in front of them, and they'll go, nah, and you'll go, eat it, it's your dinner, and they go, nah, and you'll say, well, what do you want? And they go, baked beans, and you'll say, you expect me to cook more baked beans? Yes, otherwise I'll scream. And you think, I can't believe this. My parents would have just said, shut up, and eat whatever's on the table. But we sort of, feel a bit guilty and go and make the baked beans and serve it to the little emperor. And often one thinks, okay, this is disastrous. They're going to end up like spoilt brats. There is that. There is the entitled young worker who swans in, age 23, and it's all a bit of a disaster. And they say to their boss, well, that's what you want me to do, but, I'm not sure I want to do that. That's going to be a disaster. But there's another model, which is that this person is going to have unbelievable chutzpah and drive and a sense of entitlement in the right way and confidence in the right way. So there's good and bad confidence, and I think we need to be better at bottling this magical ingredient, because however much we try on the educational establishment, we also need to get better at that psychological factor, because for better or for worse, it's psychological factors that very often drive success or failure. No, I'm just going to end it with a few remarks. We hear a lot about work-life balance, okay? And here's my thought on work-life balance. It's impossible, right? Absolutely, whatever they tell you, it's impossible. Because anything that you are passionately committed to unbalances your life, whether that's your children or your job or anything, right? It unbalances your life, and that's okay. That's okay. You can't have it all. You have to make choices, and in a way, what I think it's absolutely key for every individual to focus on is what do they want to be successful as and at? Because one thing's for sure, you're not going to be able to be successful at everything. When we hear the word successful, certain images come to mind. If I said, someone very successful is going to come on stage in a minute, you think, okay, this person's rich, this person's maybe famous, this person's good in business, something big cheese, that kind of thing, right? If out came, a mum, right? A mum. And you say, this is a very successful person, right? Because she's brought up, 3 children, and they're all doing well, and the home's in good shape. We think, okay, yes, nice, but I'm not sure about this. Is that successful? Well, look up the word success in the English dictionary, and it tells you very succinctly that all that success means is not CEOs and money. It just means doing something well, okay? And we can't do everything well, so we're going to have to make a choice. Every time you see a CEO, you're seeing somebody who, yes, is very successful at managing cash flows and employees, etc. And, let me make a generalization. That person's probably not madly successful at family life, okay? Probably not. They're probably not doing such a great job with their spouse or such a great job with their kids, because it's really hard to do it all. And so I think we have to choose. And part of the problem is that society gives us lots of images of success. Success is ... When you grow up, you should be a ... Right? And these images are extremely powerful, and they can guide our whole lives. Or it may be not until late midlife that we suddenly think, that image of success that I'm chasing, I'm not sure that it's me. And it's bad to fail, but it's even worse to fail chasing a goal that might not even be your own. And many of us are chasing goals that are not really our own. If you're a man, they're very often your father's. They're very often societies. They're often not quite in sync with your true self. It requires enormous courage, patience, tolerance from loved ones around us to allow us time to discover success as we mean to define it. I think the hope is that organizations like Randstad and others are those that will help to facilitate a correct fit between our deepest self and the needs of the world. And I think happiness is that moment when the deep self interlocks with the commercial needs of the world, and you are able, and I say this not facetiously, to sell your soul. And normally people go, oh, that person sold their soul. That's precisely what I think it means to be deeply fulfilled in the workplace, to be able to sell your soul. Thank you very much.